All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we are talking about the Carolina Panthers, and I am joined by Jacob Roland from the Beards Watch podcast. How's it going?
Doing good, man. How you doing?
Any day I can talk about football is a good day, definitely.
Enough.
Now, with the Panthers, we have a lot to talk about, especially with some kind of breaking news. Now, we'll just kind of get right to it, right? The Panthers fall short in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. What are your thoughts on that? And then what is next at QB for the Panthers?
So I haven't really spoken too much on my thoughts on Deshaun Watson, so this is kind of cool to be able to drop it here on your episode.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of was torn. I mean, let's put the allegations and all that were one thing. How is a fan base gonna take it? I mean, it's very rare you have a chance at a 26-year-old former Pro Bowl QB, top 8 quarterback in the league. So cool in that aspects that they were in it, but just the way they built the team, I can see why they were out. Now I know they were in it because they were offering the 6th overall pick, probably 2 other first-round picks, a couple of their young stars, which probably was very appeasing to Houston. Getting a Brian Burns or a Derek Brown or a possibly let's see, who else could they have thrown up? I don't think McCaffrey was in the bunch, but some of their, Jeremy Chin. But I just don't think Deshaun. I mean, Deshaun looked at it, and there's just been mayhem across the board. There's been just not continuity. Rule seems way over his head. He hasn't really improved. I mean, they got worse because we went one more game. We added a game in the NFL season. He still only won 5 games. We thought we were going to see a lot of improvement, and we didn't. So back to I'm okay with it. I'm not a big trade a lot of assets. If they were similar to the Saints, where they seem like they're kind of a piece away, right? The Panthers are multiple pieces away. He was going to be almost on a team similar to that team he was on a couple years ago. Last he played when they went 4-12 and were picking top 10. So that's where I was worried is you trade away that pick and he's still running for his life. Darnold ran for his life last year. Cam did. PJ Walker did. I mean, I think Houston was just kind of being kind because I think their GM really liked the offer that we had. We probably could give them the most. But in the end, Atlanta is his home. I heard on Pat McAfee today, he said, I mean, if all that stuff happened to you, of course you just want to go home, right? Be around your people with all these accusations, be it, true, false, all that kind of stuff around. You'd rather just be with all your people. And then the Saints are just consistently, winners. Even though when they miss the playoffs, it's not like they're only winning 3 or 4 or 5 games. They're at least winning 8, 9, 10 games and maybe missing the playoffs. So I can see why it's down to those two. I'm kind of relieved it's finally over, right? Like, you're anxious when it was all going on. What's it going to do? What are they going to give up? Are they going to give up too much to where now you're completely depleted? If they do take the offer, now it's like, okay, let's move on. Let's figure out what are we going to do at pick 6. And then we don't pick again till like the 4th round because we traded a 2 for Darnold. We traded a 3 for CJ Henderson. So now let's figure out what are we going to do next.
Yeah, and do you see them picking a quarterback, early on in this draft, or I mean, what is the best of what's left? I guess.
Really, if you're looking at it, is it Mariota? Is it Minshew? Is it Jameis? I think the Saints, obviously, depending on what they do, is Jameis coming back or not? Like if they get Deshaun, obviously Jameis is in. I would be fine with them rolling a 1-year deal with one of those guys. Taking a left tackle at 6 because it seems like now that the Jags have franchise tagged their guy, I think they're going defensive end. It looks like the Lions probably will go defensive end. So one of those top tackles are going to slide, be it the guy from NC State, Alabama, or Mississippi State, Cross. So I think that would be a good play. But I also wouldn't mind if they want to take the gamble on a quarterback. I would go with Malik Willis just because he seems to bring some excitement. He's got some mobility where that offensive line isn't necessarily set. He could maybe escape and let you build some. But I think the problem is I don't know if Rule being on the hot seat is going to be ready to roll the dice with a rookie quarterback that's very raw, that some would say maybe shouldn't go in the first round. But with the lack of quarterback talent in this first round, it seems that he's shooting up the boards.
Yeah, it's such an interesting place to be this draft. I mean, because, you don't want to be average where you can't, be high enough to pick a good quarterback in a good quarterback draft. But obviously that's not the case this year. But, the Panthers are a few pieces away. And it's so interesting then with the coaching staff. I mean, we found out with even, the Bears that, sometimes you have a coaching staff that, I mean, they're not thinking toward the future. They need to win now.
Yeah.
And when you look at Matt Rule, I mean, my question is, can Matt Rule long?
Kenny Rule, I get you there. I mean, I don't know. Right now, the fan in me says you want him to work, right? Just because they've invested, they gave him a 7-year deal, made him a top 10 paid coach, even though he hadn't really won anything in college. I mean, he couldn't even win a bowl game at Baylor. So that was interesting from the jump. But I don't know. His problems from Baylor and even from Temple, if you look at it, has been game management, burning timeouts, when it's not needed, and just certain game situations. And that you thought that would have improved from year 1 to year 2. I always thought it was interesting when Rivera was going through his struggles and when he finally broke out and he started winning, he made the confession of, I wish I would have had a former head coach on my staff when I first started being a first-time head coach, because they can kind of just help you, guide you a little bit, right? When Matt Rule just hired, it seemed like all of his buddies, and then the only outlier was Joe Brady, and then he got thrown under the bus. It seems like he was so hard-headed and not wanting to fix things that now he kind of did. Now he went out and got a couple guys. Now McAdoo was still kind of related to Tom Coughlin in a way, and that's kind of his tree. So we'll see, but it didn't seem to be all his buddies from either Temple, Baylor, or a grad assistant when he was at Penn State or wherever he may be. So hopefully we'll see. I mean, I think we'll find out quick. I don't think now with this Deshaun Watson, Temple put all his eggs in the basket. They gave him the best offer out there. Billionaires rarely get told no, and he just got told no after he's been getting told yes. I mean, we got the new soccer team that he jumped over 4 or 5 different cities because he had the outbid because he's got so much money. So I'm interested to see how it's going to go. I hope they don't. It seemed like they panicked last year, right? They missed out on the Stafford trade. They offered pick 8 and Teddy Bridgewater, and they said no, they want to do right by Stafford. He went to the Rams. He wouldn't want a Super Bowl, so good for him on calling the bluff there and saying, I don't want to go to Carolina. But then they panicked and they gave up, a 4, a 2, and a 4 for Darnold, and he looked great the first 6 weeks, right? And then all of a sudden he's the kind of quarterback that if everything's not perfect, it gets worse. And in the NFL, as we see, you're going to get hit as a quarterback. Things aren't going to go perfect, and he just crumbled under all of that. And they tried to salvage it those last couple of games to try to get some trade action just to try to show if he had anything good left, and it didn't happen. He still kept stinking it up. So I don't know. It's going to be tough to see I don't think they go with Darnold again. They're kind of stuck with it, but do they go with a rookie quarterback? Do you see the GM? I think some of these moves that they've made free agents wise, I think Matt Rule has kind of taken a step back, which is good. I think he just needs to focus on the coaching and let, the Scott Fitterer, the Dan Morgans run the actual player development / finding these guys, because it seemed like he was doing too much and spread too thin, and we haven't seen success. So we'll see. Can he rule long? I don't think so. I think this is – it's still early. I hate to – and March 17th, I mean, we're just a month removed from the Rams win the Super Bowl, so I don't want to go too much sky is falling. Let's get it's all over. But it's tough when you've got 1 pick in the first round and you don't pick again till the 4th. Now, again, that could all change within the next couple of weeks because they could trade some players or do something like that. But I don't know. To be determined, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Well, that's why I actually had Will Kunkel on from Fox Charlotte, and he said he was predicting that they would move on from him this year, and it's such a fine line in the NFL, with talent wise, that when you have a top 10 or top 5 quarterback, that it almost can cover up a lot of coaching mistakes, even some of those late game mistakes, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think we saw that with Rivera and Cam Newton. I think Cam Newton carried Rivera a lot. Not taking anything away from Rivera. He won Coach of the Year twice when he was here. All that stuff. We got to, Super Bowl, lost that. But I really think, as we see, a great MVP type of quarterback can cover up a lot of that. And they haven't found that yet. I mean, you saw, going back to the Cam thing, the receiving and the team he went to the Super Bowl with is unreal. I mean, Greg Olsen was a household name, Jonathan Stewart. Other than that, on the offense, it was not a lot of guys you knew. You know what I mean? And then even the year, I think they had the next best chance was the year they lost to New Orleans in New Orleans. Their offensive line, they started like at the beginning of the year, they were rotating like a defensive tackle. It used to be a defensive tackle in there. They just never built around him right. And now you're kind of seeing a same thing with like the Christian McCaffreys and the DJ Moores, where they literally ran McCaffrey into the ground. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. What do? I mean, right now it's just the coaching staff. He seems like he's Rule's more fit to go to coach in college, where he can kind of have a little more control, because 18, 19, 20-year-olds, even though the new NIL deal gives them some money in their pockets, you still ultimately can control what they do when they do it in certain aspects. Where here, you've got grown men with kids, wives, other businesses. There's only so much you can tell, and eventually start tuning you out. So,
yeah, and when you have like personalities, I mean, when you talk about kind of Cam Newton, and he came back, I mean, what was like that, like Cam Newton kind of coming back, and maybe I don't know if you had hoped that he would kind of reclaim a little bit of what he had when he came back, or obviously when he said I'm back. I mean, what were your thoughts with that, and then what really has happened with Cam Newton as well?
I mean, it was fantastic when he came back, right? It gave you a shoulder juice that the franchise hadn't had in a while. I mean, first off, the way they handled his exit was terrible. I mean, to go back a little bit, it just the way Matt Rule praised him, and then all of a sudden they cut him where they could have traded him, they could have given him, and then before they even really cut him, they signed Teddy Bridgewater like day one of free agency, gave him a 3-year deal, and it was like, wait a second. Cam had 1 year left. You could have rode it out with him. If he was completely washed or you were done, you could have done the send-off then. Or if you really wanted to do it, you cut Cam and play Will Grier. And then you had Trevor Lawrence coming out in that draft. Zach Wilson shot up. You could have then seen if Will Grier had something, kind of semi-tank, but still competing. You're in, why not? And save some money there and not eat all that money that you had to give to Teddy B. So it just, the whole start of it stunk. But him coming back, I mean, our other side's fun times is we do our reaction videos. We watch the Panthers games on our YouTube, and we post, me and my buddies and wife and friends and everything, watching the Panthers game. And that one was fantastic, just with all the reactions of Cam coming back. And it was awesome. I wish he would have started that game, because the stat right now where it's like the last 14 games he started for the Panthers, he's 0-14. Not all his fault. We know QB stats can be a weird thing, but it was great. And then the Washington game, it was just – they had it, and the coaching staff made little minor errors there, and the offensive line stunk. I mean, the quarterbacks the whole year were running for their life, and Cam isn't the Cam of 2015, 2016 he is, but I think with the right pieces and you give him a decent line, and McCaffrey then got hurt again, I think he could still – I mean, he was still a dual threat down in the red zone, and he was scoring tons of touchdowns if he can get in the right situation. I'd love to see him have a full offseason. I mean, he had half a off season with the Patriots 2 years ago. Then he had a full off season, but they took Mac Jones, so then they cut him late in the training camp series, and then we kind of picked him up halfway through, and he's learning a whole new offense. And I thought he played as good as you can be with what was given and what really he could do with the offensive play calling.
Do you think they bring him back at all, or?
I don't know. Unless they exhaust all possible resources. I mean, some people were mentioning maybe they try to trade for Derek Carr now, but I think with the Devontae Adams trade, he's staying there, so that's off the table. I don't. Do you try and trade for Baker Mayfield? I feel like he's better than Sam Darnold, but you're kind of in the same situation of figuring out, like, do we have to give him that big contract? I mean, they came out the same year. Baker picked 1, Darnold picked 3. So I don't know there. Who else? I mean, really out there trade wise, but again, the assets, like you said, we have. First round pick and then another pick till 4th round. At this point, you took your swings last year, and it's a sunk cost. It's time to maybe just sit there, lick your wounds. Maybe you trade back from pick 6 to get down either another offensive lineman, or if Willis slides, or if you like Pickett, you take him a little bit later. But I don't, it's really a lot can change to get Cam. Can he come back? If they're totally, like I said, there's nothing else out there, and that seems to be the only option. And maybe I've seen a lot of people also pitch out. Malik Willis was one of Cam's. He was on his 7-on-7 back when he was, doing his tournament teams and stuff. So there's a connection there. So that would be cool to have Cam kind of mentor Malik. I don't know what you would do with Darnold there, because that just seems like a weird talk. I don't know if it'd be toxic, but just a weird environment to have all those guys there. But could he come back? Sure, but I don't know. I don't think Matt Rule ever really wanted him. I think last season was a David Tepper strong arm, as in I need to get more of our fans back in the stands, and maybe we have a little bit of juice. They made the Stephon Gilmore trade, thought they still had – the defense was playing great. I mean, they were number 2, number 1 at certain parts of the season, but it just seemed like every game when the offense would have a great game, the defense would give up big plays. When the defense was having a great game, the offense couldn't help but turn the ball over and over again. So they just never got to a gel in a perfect game, it seemed like.
Yeah, and so kind of with that and with all the question marks, going into the season, I mean, what are your expectations, going into this season for the Panthers and where would you like to see them see them maybe making progress toward playoffs and eventually Super Bowl?
Expectations, again, it's still just March, so a lot can still happen, as you know. I mean, we still got the draft. We still got some free agency left. I mean, Panthers didn't make that trade for Darnold till it was Easter weekend. I mean, it was like Easter Sunday or the Monday after Easter when they had it, when it went down. So still a lot can happen. Expectations, I mean, you'd like more than 5 wins, right? You'd like to see progress. We've gone 2 seasons with 5 wins. I don't know if playoffs is in the cards, but it's going to come down to that quarterback play and that offensive line play. I mean, I just don't know if the coaching that Matt Rule's the guy to get it done. But I do like the moves that they've signed so far in free agency. I liked Austin Corbett, the offensive lineman from the Rams. I should have been doing stuff like this a long time ago. I like they just signed that linebacker from Jacksonville a couple hours ago. Seems like they finally tried to get a middle linebacker. And who else was it they went out? Donta Foreman, running back from the Titans. They finally have that big back. They talked about it all last year. And they thought they got it with Chuba Hubbard in the 4th round, but he seems to be just like a special teams guy, maybe kick return, cover kicks. So at least now they've got that guy that, they're going to try a different approach with Christian McCaffrey. And I think that was the other frustrating thing last year was, okay, the year before Christian McCaffrey got hurt and missed about all the season, right? Well, that should have given you that whole season and the whole offseason to have a plan of if he gets hurt again, what are we going to do? And they didn't do it. They just said, oh, he got hurt again. Okay, well, we took a guy in the 4th or 5th round in Chuba Hubbard. Maybe he'll be it. But a rookie running back, that's tough. And he just seemed to never get his feet under him. He'd always trip anytime he got 5 or 6 yards down the field. He did as best he could, but you would have thought that would have been a move last year. Go get an experienced veteran to back him up, and they kind of didn't. And then it kind of was like, well, wait a second. Did you not just learn? Again, learning from your mistakes, right? That would be another thing. When I would see expectations, hopefully they're learning. And it seems like they are, at least on the GM side, learning from mistakes last year. Let's see if the coaching staff can get it. And hopefully with McAdoo and some of these other guys, Steve Wilkes, who was here during the Super Bowl run, who coached our defensive backs. Again, now he has some of those former head coaches on the staff. Let's see if it can work out. To be determined, but I always try to remain optimistic here in March because no games are really won here, and we're not playing again for another 6 months. So.
Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously, it's always interesting to talk about. As a Bears fan, I don't, with some of their moves and just kind of knowing where they're at with trajectory with Fields and new coaching staff, I don't expect them to do well. I don't expect to get like a playoffs, division title, but I want to see certain things, and obviously, I want to see what the new coaching staff can do with Fields. And the biggest thing I think probably for an NFL team is that quarterback question. And if you at least think you have that answered, then there's a lot of other pieces that you can do that you can start to kind of put in place. And it seems like the Panthers have kind of been in this kind of like quarterback purgatory for a little bit, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, ever since Cam's shoulder kind of started, ever since TJ Watt on that Thursday night football game absolutely blasted his right shoulder and kind of shook up all the scar tissue in there, it just seems to has gone from just journeyman and trying to find that guy. And that's what makes me think if they can in the next couple weeks / month, I mean, we got the draft here, end of April, so a month and a half, can't find a guy. But again, at this point, you're almost looking for a stopgap, right? Mm-hmm. And so do they pivot and go after a Pickett, go after a Willis, or the 4th round, do they go get Ritter is there? I don't know, but again, that'll tell us a lot of who's running the show. If they go quarterback at 6 or trade back and go quarterback, then that tells me that the GM has now taken full ownership of this draft and Rule's kind of taking a step back and he's going to focus on coaching. Because at that point, like we talked about earlier, not a lot of hot seat coaches want to roll the dice. I mean, you experienced it last year with Justin Fields. Even though they trade up and got him, they still were adamant about starting Andy Dalton. And it was like, why? You just traded your first round pick the following year. And it's not like Andy Dalton was a world beater. I mean, he just came from
No.
Dallas and was pathetic at Dallas when Dak got hurt. And so that's what you kind of don't want. But that's what you kind of, if you look into the mirror of the future, might happen if they go with a Pickett or they go with the Willis and Darnold's still there, or they go get a stopgap and still draft a quarterback. Rule's going to try to win as many games as he can, and then you're going to have ownership and GM going, well, we need to at least see what we've got in this guy, right? So,
well, yeah, and so there is the one question about what the Panthers are going to do, but the other question is now when you look at Deshaun Watson, if it's down to the Falcons and the Saints, I mean, you could have an amazing quarterback there in the division for the next, I don't know, 10, 12 years. I don't know, depending on how long,
Yeah.
I mean, this year it's going to be interesting to see how many years or how many games suspension he gets.
Yeah.
And obviously you got Tom Brady coming back. And so, everyone's kind of assuming it's his division, but not for much longer. So, but Deshaun Watson being in the division, I mean, as a fan, with all of the good things that are going on in Charlotte, with the Hornets doing well, with the new soccer, I mean, and plenty of other things kind of in the area. Does that, I mean, if there's not a winning product on the field, I mean, is that going to turn you off, or you're kind of there regardless?
Oh no, I'm here. I mean, I've been here since the inception of the team. Since '95, I was in kindergarten. My dad drove me down to a game. And when they were in Clemson, so I'm here. I was here 1-15 when they won the first game against the Vikings and then lost, 15 straight. I've been seen the 2-4 teams when Jimmy Clausen started so many games and he was just threw the ball out of bounds almost every other possession. So I'm here. I'm a fan. And that's where, a couple of years ago, I had my wife and I had our first son, and you kind of start looking at life as all right, I love the Panthers. My basement's painted in Panther blue. I've got plenty of paraphernalia. I've went to training camps as a kid, got autographs. I love the Panthers, but I try not to let it affect me completely to where I'm depressed about it, right? It sucks when they lose because you're a fan. You got the stickers on your car, you got the license plate and all that stuff, and you spend time talking to you on a podcast, and we talk on our podcast about it too because it's fun and it's sports. It's supposed to be, out, escape from the real world. But I try not to let it get me because it's, again, today with, I was tweeting back and forth with a couple of my buddies, and they were like, oh, this is the, the lowest the franchise has ever been. And I just think, I don't think that, and we don't have to dive necessarily into that, but I just think that they lost out on getting a guy, but he's also still has 22 civil sexual assault cases. So sometimes the best deals are the ones you don't make, right? That, we're going to find out, okay, let's think. Ben Roethlisberger got 6 games, I think, when he had his ordeal, and then it bumped down to 4 or something like that. You might have to fact check, but so maybe he gets 4, 6, whatever it may be, but he's 26. He's a mobile quarterback. How long can he play, right? Is it, I don't know if it's 10 years. I don't think he plays till he's 36. I don't know. He could, but there's very few guys that are playing till 36. Brady is just an outlier. You can't compare anybody to him because he's just insane. He's made a deal with the devil, and he's still playing it out, and that's fantastic by him. I mean, you go from hating the guy to realizing, wow, it's just insanely incredible what he's doing. So I don't know. I mean, where what do we think? I mean, the Panthers beat the Texans a couple years ago when they had J.J. Watt and Deshaun Watson. We had Kyle Allen starting. So it just depends. And if he goes to Atlanta, I mean, what did they give up? And honestly, who is on that Falcons team? I mean, they've got, the tight end they took last year. What's his name?
Kyle Pitts. Yep.
Kyle Pitts. Yeah. Drew a blank on that one. But other than that, I mean, Calvin Ridley just got suspended, and he kind of quit halfway through before all that.
Yep.
I don't know. Besides him just wanting to be home and around his family, which is awesome for him. But now the Saints, again, a different story, but who knows, right? We can set all these perfect teams together, and then it could just all collapse around. And like I said, I just always go back to that. The team the Texans had with Bill O'Brien, Deshaun Watson, and they went 4-12, and then they ended up, trading DeAndre Hopkins for a 2 and David Johnson, and that's when this whole thing kind of started where he wanted to get out. And that's what I was kind of worried about. If we trade for Deshaun Watson, we're in a similar boat to where we've got a head coach on the hot seat. Matt Rule's not as good as Bill O'Brien. I didn't like Bill O'Brien, but he at least had went to the playoffs and won some games, right? We can't guarantee that we weren't going to be picking top 5 again if he comes on this team, right? You're hoping, but all of a sudden he goes out there and blows his knee out. in training camp or week 6, what do we now we're sitting here going, well, the only good thing as an NFL fan when your team stinks is the draft, right? You go, okay, well, at least we can get one of these top talent. Always sell that hope. So at least now I can sit back, I can enjoy our pick 6. We've done the past couple of years for our YouTube as well. We reaction videos to the draft picks. So we'll sit down here in our basement. We have a fantasy game we play where everyone, kind of like a March Madness bracket, where we have points accustomed to each pick number. And if you pick the right number or the right team, you get points. And then we have like a little trophy, and we all go out and buy something $5 or cheaper at the gas station, and whoever wins it gets the pot of stuff in the middle. And then we start, we piece all the picks together. And then I've actually just had, friends also of other teams send me picks for their teams, of their reaction videos. So I had a buddy of mine last year who was a Bears fan. He sent me his muted reaction because his 2 kids were asleep upstairs. But the Bears made the pick for Justin Fields. And just put that together, and it's a fun little good time of content there for our YouTube channel. So now I can I was really worried about them trading everything away, and I love the NFL draft, love following it. And the past couple times the Panthers have traded away their first round picks, it hasn't worked out. They traded for Everett Brown, a second round pick, a future first, and he kind of busted out. Jeff Otah did a couple years. He did okay when they traded up for him, but I'm cool with it. It sucks that we don't have a quarterback, but being able to keep some assets here and striking out on that, I'm okay with. We still keep our core defensive players. That was our strong part, right? The Brian Burns, the Jeremy Chin, Derek Brown. Those were our first and second round picks that have really played up to their skill level. Probably should a little bit of improvement, hopefully, coming in this next year. But I'm cool with it. I'm at peace with it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Obviously, the owners and everyone in leadership kind of looks at it differently. And a lot of them, I think they look for star power because they want fans in the stands, but even when you look at the Falcons, you look at the Saints, I mean, their cap, it's just a mess. Their cap's a mess. Even as a Bears fan, we looked at, everyone here in Wisconsin got excited when they signed Aaron Rodgers. Oh, everyone's coming back. I'm like, well, hold on there. And obviously now we found out with, Devontae Adams getting, traded. And so that's going to be interesting. And obviously the optimistic Packer fan says, well, they'll just draft a wide receiver and Rodgers will be able to carry him. Well, he hasn't been able to do that even with Devontae Adams, even with the best wide receiver. So, things happen with the cap and you're right. It is probably a lot of times the best trade is the one you don't do, because then you just kind of have to wait and see. And when you kind of look at that, I mean, there has been some discussion about trading Christian McCaffrey. I mean, do you see that happening? And would you kind of, like them just kind of blow it up and just kind of be like, build, especially with his injury history? Or
you just talked about having stars, and I still think he's the only true star right now on the team. And the reason he got paid like that is because that same offseason is when they let Cam go, they let Olsen go, Kuechly retired, and they were just jettisoning all their other veterans. So they kind of had to pay somebody to sell jerseys. I mean, right now in Carolina, if you want to go buy a jersey for your kid or yourself, it's McCaffrey, and then you got to go custom make a DJ Moore. The quarterback changes every year. I mean, there's not a lot of options. I mean, a couple years ago, you could get a Cam, a Kuechly as a kid, and then it was McCaffrey, and it was like, oh, I can get 2T, 3T, all the different sizes. Even years before that, it was Delhomme, Smith. You could get. Now it's not. So do I see him blowing it up? The big thing is, as you talked about cap, I think his cap hit is still going to be somewhere around like a dead cap hit, even if you trade him like $20-something million, right? At that point, you might as well just at least have him on your roster if you're paying him that much money, right? Even if it's for 7 games. And then maybe next year when it drops a little, you look at trading him. But he's still one of the most dynamic players in the NFL, big if when healthy, because of these last 2 years. But I think with what we just saw with the Foreman signing, I really think now they're going to try to put him in the slot a little more, not give him those carries where he has gotten hurt, rolled up ankle on up in the middle of a pile. It was against the Dolphins a little, that final one that knocked him out of the season. So he didn't seem too happy about it. But again, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, here it is. They've done it 2 years in a row, the same thing over and over again. They've got to try something different. And, I also heard, Greg Olsen kind of thinks he might be like too ripped, right? Like He hasn't said it in public, but some whispers behind where he works out so much. And he even, McCaffrey touched on it in his exit interview. Maybe I should take some more rest days where he's not, is he too shredded to where your bones don't have, your muscles don't have that flexibility where you're just too tense and uptight where you're not necessarily able to have some of those fluid motions. So I hope he can stick around. I think just now, especially missing out on Deshaun Watson, just star power wise, I think they keep him. Now, would it surprise me if the Bills reached out and wanted to trade for him? I think a couple weeks ago, then they were supposed to get J.D. McKissick, and then McKissick said yes. Then he went back to Washington. I don't know. I mean, it'd be something to implore if they want to blow it up, and can they get a one out of it? What is the valuable one pick for the Bills? What is that, like 27, 28 that they're picking? Is that worth a Christian McCaffrey? Maybe. But I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are going to say yes because he's been hurt the last 2 years, but I think he's still got immense value there. And whatever quarterback, if it's a one stopgap or if it's a rookie, he can be a great dump off valve when stuff hits the fan.
Absolutely. And when you talk about value as well, what are you seeing from the Panthers wide receiver core? I mean, you got Terrace Marshall. I mean, what are you seeing from that group in 2022?
Now, the one that seems, you're talking about trades, Robbie Anderson could be one that could be on the move. Now, they gave him, a deal, extension end of last summer, and it just didn't work out. It didn't work, whatsoever. Everything cut in half from what he had the year before with Teddy B. You thought it would go up with him and Darnold having a history from the Jets. But I mean, DJ Morrison he wants to get paid. He just saw Christian Kirk get paid. I don't think anybody is going to give Christian Kirk money out there for.
That was crazy.
I mean, unless you're Devontae Adams, unless you're a Justin Jefferson, but Jefferson's still on his rookie contract, and Jamar Chase is on his rookie contract in the Bengals. Those are some of the top receivers left. But I mean, it's hard to judge them a lot because the quarterback play has been so erratic and inconsistent, right? DJ Moore is great with the ball in his hands. I wish they would use him more like a Deebo Samuel because he is almost like a running back, a wide receiver built like a running back, similar to Deebo, not as thick as Deebo is. But if they could, and they did it for one game, it was one of Joe Brady's last games, and they were just trying to muster as much as they could. And they would put Christian McCaffrey and him out there. And even some games when Christian missed, they put him out there in the both of them in the backfield. Like, when you're playing Madden, you start just playing with players around, getting, trying to just jilt the system there. And so hopefully they do that. I wish, Terrace Marshall started off good, but it just, again, receiver seems to be one of the slowest developing positions sometimes in the National Football League. And it just never really clicked. It seemed like with him and Darnold, and the coaching staff kind of just seemed like what personnel they were going. And then, Shi Smith was a 6th-round pick they took last year. He seems to be kind of got some electric stuff juice in him. But again, it was just hard to evaluate a lot of those positions last year because the quarterbacks didn't have time. And if they did have time, the ball was just getting thrown all over the place.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, you talk about, it's almost like the chicken and the egg. I mean, you have, it was for a while, even with the Packers with, and Devontae Adams, when he started out, a lot of it was, Rodgers kind of making him, but he's kind of worked on his craft and become one of the best wide receivers in the game. And this offseason has been interesting as well with wide receivers. I mean, Allen Robinson from the Bears didn't even get a very, big contract from the Rams. And so it's interesting. The Bears are just signing kind of Byron Pringle and some of these other Equanimous St. Brown. And so, I mean, not really big picks. And it, obviously, I think the Bears will go ahead and pick a wide receiver in the draft. The Panthers aren't going to do that, right?
I don't think so. Not in the first round. Now, in the later rounds, you could throw a dart at the wall. I mean, the way I always look at the draft is like at least rounds 1 through 3 to 4. You're trying to get guys that you expect to be starters, right? Maybe now,
not the Bears, by the way.
See, and that's where we come back to the quandary with who they take at 6. If it's a left tackle, he's sliding right in there. Yeah. But going back to, you mentioned going over last year's draft class, I think their biggest regret, and Rule has never really admitted his mistakes that well, but I think him and the GM said they wish they would have played Brady Christensen, their 3rd-round pick, first or 2 of them, at left tackle more. And the fans were screaming it. We all were saying, if the season's in the hole, why not start all the young guys, right? At least evaluate the young guys. So then okay, I need to go get another guy for this position, or I'm good here, right? So, and that's where I think the Panthers are kind of stuck is, dang, if we would have had more game tape of Christian and he can handle down the left tackle spot, now we could maybe put that 6th pick up for sale unless we really love a quarterback and maybe try to recoup some stuff. But now since they don't, it's like, okay, what are we going to gamble with? Now, do they go out and sign a guy? Quite possibly. Terran Armstead's out there. There's a couple other journeymen, but they went and did that last year with the Cam Irving, right? And he just completely started. Not saying Armstead's anywhere near where Irving is, but it could flush the whole system there if they would have just done some of that. So back to just it's just tough to what they're going to do is, as I was saying, pick your picks 1 through 4. I think you should look for at least starters or at least guys that could potentially be starters. And they did it last year. Horn looked good, and then the turf monster got him that Thursday Night Football at Houston. And so I think a lot of people, revisionist history says they should have probably taken Slater, Rashad Slater, who went to the Chargers. We could have had our left tackle. We've been good, but Rule kept preaching about these arm length, and okay, we same thing as why he didn't start Brady Christensen, but then he finally realized, well, we should at least played him there to figure it out. And then also, if it really was, some people say, well, they should have just went ahead and taken Justin Fields, and then you would at least had your quarterback. You wouldn't have to deal with all this. If you still ended up at pick six, you could then take your left tackle and you keep rolling with it. I think the Bengals are a great example of you have to have a quarterback, right? Quarterback goes down, and the Panthers have been swinging, and they haven't been able to get a home run yet. So that then brings us back to what are they going to do at pick 6? You would think this is their time to swing at a quarterback just because they've done it and they haven't had anything stick. And this is a way now with Watson saying no, Stafford saying no. How do you get a guy? You draft a guy because he can't really say no. You know what I mean? He's got to come here regardless. So, we'll see.
Yeah, the draft is always interesting. I mean, to kind of, look at ahead of time and say, okay, well, they should pick this person and that. And I'm not really a big mock draft person because you just never know after the first few picks. I mean, you can kind of guess and stuff, but it is helpful to kind of know position wise, what you'd like. And like, if they do go ahead and swing for a quarterback, are you going to be disappointed then?
No, I'll be fine with it. I mean, I think my list, I think it's like left tackle would be 1A, 1B would be quarterback. I wouldn't be mad at it because at least, again, like we just said, you need the quarterback to make the world to kind of make the world go around, right? Like it's been a long time.
I would say, but you need the right quarterback because obviously the Bears did that, and I think that's a lot of times, and that's why Ryan Pace lost his job, because even in the draft, it helps to have the right people kind of making decisions, because even in the draft room, it came out later that he was basically asking around. You had him number 1, right? You had him he was asking everybody, and you're the guy making the decision, and you should know. And I mean, with that, I mean, do you trust the leadership, everybody to kind of make the right decisions now?
Fitterer, I'm giving leeway to because this is only really his second full season right now. Rule is kind of waning. I don't think he should be really too. I mean, obviously he's got to have input because he's the head coach, right? If he doesn't want a player totally, he should say something. But I also don't think he should be the final say on that. Where it seemed like in the past couple of years he did have the final say. Again, I think it's time they've got to find a different approach, and I think that approach has got to be through the draft now. They've tried all the trades, they've used up capital, they've been told no. Again, unless they just want to go with the stopgap again and then reevaluate and go after the Bryce Young next year. But is that going to save Matt Rule's job? I don't think so. You know what I mean? I don't. And then if you end up 8-8. And not, whatever, or not, I guess not 8-8 anymore because we've got 17 games, whatever it's 9-8 or 8-9 or whatever it may be, does it keep his job? That's where, I guess that's just where the mix of pot of what are they going to do? And that's what we'll be able to, in the next couple of weeks, and then definitely at pick 6, if they stay there and in the first round, we'll be able to see what they're planning to do because as you mentioned, the right quarterback, I like Willis just because he brings a lot of juice to it, as I said earlier, and he can escape things. It seems like he's got the tools. And he seems like if you're going to swing for a guy, that's the guy with all the tools that you swing for, right?
Mhm.
Pickett seems good, but I mean, it just doesn't seem like that's the guy that would necessarily save a job. Where I think if you had a bad offensive line, not saying Pickett can't move around, Willis can move around. I mean, here's what I'll say: if they miss on this one, it's pick six. I think they're cleaning house regardless. Like, I think Rule goes anyway. Maybe Federer stays around a little bit, but as you know, if you don't have the quarterback and you swing and you miss this big, then everyone gets cleaned house at some point.
So you're almost where the Bears were last year, and it's almost worse. The Bears were in almost a worse situation to have the right quarterback, so we think so far, and the wrong coaching staff and the wrong philosophy. Because you're talking about kind of not knowing where to go and whatnot, and that's exactly where the Bears were with drafting Fields, having the guy, and then also prior to that, signing Dalton and telling him he was going to be the starter. You don't do that. And then you have a coaching staff that's going to try to save their jobs by having a veteran win games. When a rookie, he has to learn and take his lumps. And it's just, it's a tough spot to be in until you have that quarterback. And I mean, ownership, leadership, I mean, you would hope that they would be able to take a step back and just say, okay, we want to build this the right way regardless. And, if you have like a coach that starts to kind of make some choices that, are for selfish reasons, then you got to get rid of him. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's been the most frustrating thing. And we've even talked about it amongst those Panther fans on our pod, is just how we thought it was going to, like, they preached and preached, rebuild, rebuild, rebuild. And then all of a sudden they would make moves to where it wasn't a rebuild and it was like win now, right? Like the trade for Stephon Gilmore. Now, I wasn't mad about that because it was a 6th-round pick next year. I think you take a flyer on that, right? Like, why not? They were kind of in the hunt there at that trade deadline and got him. But then, the week before they traded for C.J. Henderson, a 3rd-round pick, and then he wasn't playing. And then it was like, okay, yeah, I get it that he's a 1st-round pick from the year before and he kind of wore out his welcome, but they would make moves that weren't, hey, let's just build this the right way and try to. And if they really were, they would have maybe traded some of those players who are on expiring deals and try to recoup some draft picks knowing they lost some. So I think that's what's been real frustrating is they preach rebuild, but then it's all of a sudden it's like, oh no, now we got to win now. And then all of a sudden when they don't win, it's like, whoa, why are you mad at us for not winning? We're supposed to be in a rebuild. And it's like, well, you just made moves where it's supposed to be a win now move, right? Like, but so that's been the whole confusing thing, is just there hasn't seemed like there's a proper direction of where we're going and what the team's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of winning now, I want to talk a little bit about your podcast, the Beers Watch podcast, and when did it start growing per se, beard growing, and talk about some of the things that you talk about on that podcast, other than the Panthers.
Yeah. So we started this podcast. I wanted to say, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago. I think we're coming up in June. I think it's 6, maybe 6 or 7. So did you ever watch Game of Thrones?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So the Beers Watch kind of knock off of the Night's Watch.
Yes.
So in our first couple logos, now I started it with a guy I worked with, and we would actually get in trouble at our cubicles because we would be talking about sports, Game of Thrones episode breakdowns, pop culture, all that stuff, where the boss would come out and be like, hey, you guys have been out here talking too loud or too long about all these certain topics. So then we were like, well, hey, once my wife and I moved in this house, we had a basement, and we kind of pitched the idea like, hey, why don't we start a podcast, and we just talk about all this stuff that we get in trouble at work with and all that. And that was around June. And then by about October, we had some creative differences, and he just kind of decided not to do it anymore. So he left, and it was kind of like, where do I pivot? Where do I go? And I still want to do the podcast. I still had buddies. We started it where people would just come down to the basement, and we'd hang out, and we'd shoot the breeze for a little bit and then go our separate ways. And so then, I got with a couple other buddies, and we kind of kept it going. And then we would just, it focused on starting off Game of Thrones breakdown episodes, where we would go through after Game of Thrones aired Sunday, we'd do our podcast Tuesday, and we would break down every episode that would come out, and we just kind of break down scene by scene what we thought and all that kind of stuff. And then obviously when Game of Thrones would end, let's talk about football. Let's talk about this. And we've done other, we've talked about the Stranger Things season when it dropped a couple of years ago. We've we really talk about anything and everything. I've had all different walks of life of people on here, and we just, I've had my old college friends on here. I've had, work friends on here. I've had people I've never met, similar to you, reaching out to me, wanting to be on your podcast. I've done the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the pandemic, like I said, we used to everyone would come to the basement and we'd have some beer, and then we'd start to get everybody loose. We'd play Mario Kart. And for those who may not know what Mario Kart is, it's basically Mario Kart. We started with the N64, and you have to finish your beer before all 3 laps are up, and you also can't drink or drive. So you have to put your controller down while you're drinking or chugging, and you can choose whenever you want to drink and all that kind of stuff. So we would do that before the episode to kind of get everybody loose, right? Like once you chug a beer or at least drink one, you kind of at least get a little bit loose. And then we kind of had the bright idea, like, well, why aren't we, we'd always have these epic finishes or, people talking trash. Why don't we record these and just put them on our YouTube as well? And that's why we started doing it. And we started just recording them. And then it turned into like when people would come over and hang out in the basement, we just record 5 or 6 and shoot different, games and all that kind of stuff. So really, and that kind of branched off as also, it was about, I want to say 6 to 8 months after we had our firstborn, my wife and I love going to breweries.
Yeah.
And so we'd go to, Asheville down here in North Carolina or Raleigh or even around Charlotte. People would always ask us, hey, what do you think of this spot? And it kind of was like, well, everyone keeps asking us, why not we just, shoot a brewery review of what we think, throw some B-roll on there, rate it, score it, all that good stuff. And so we started doing that and also loading it up in our YouTube as They See Me Rolling. I wanted to do it a little bit separate from the Beards Watch, just in case we ever decide to shutter the Beards Watch and just kind of, keep it. But it's still a, synergy there, if you may say.
Yeah.
So we do that. So like on our YouTube, it's, brewery reviews anywhere we've gone. We've gone up a couple of years ago. A buddy of mine, he married a lady from Wisconsin. So we road tripped up there and we stopped through New Glarus.
Oh yeah.
We hit a couple breweries.
Spotted Cow, yeah.
Yeah. Spotted, we hit a couple breweries up in the Chicago area. We definitely we went out of our way because I knew everyone had always talked about New Glarus, Spotted Cow, go up that way. So we had to go out of it. And that was a fantastic, cool spot. Love that place. I mean, it was just awesome. And so anytime we try to go somewhere, we try to at least hit a couple breweries and do a little brewery review. And then, like I said, we got the Mario Karts. And then the reaction videos, we always joke about, I wish we would have started it during the Panthers' recent Super Bowl run in 2015 because we would have, and that was before a lot of me and my friends, we had kids, wives, we were still dating, so we had tons, we had 20, 30 people coming over to our house and watching these games. And that season, I mean, they only lost 2 games, right? One to the Falcons and then the Super Bowl. And I mean, I just remember there were times of just reactions of just going crazy. And so just after we started doing reaction videos, God, what did we do? We did the NFL draft.
I was going to say, you should do like a parody of, you sitting around, everybody kind of gathered around for, your Panthers first round draft pick and just kind of cheer like it's that.
Yeah. So we've done that. And then it kind of just dawned on me, why don't we do reaction videos of our Panthers games? Because we still have some good friends that come over. And that's how we kind of grew to do the reaction videos of that. So that's just kind of how it's gone. And we just, we're not, we've done other businesses where we've gone and done like a dance video with a girl I went to high school with who runs a dance studio up here. So we kind of just do anything and everything that will come up that's just fun and wholesome and all that kind of good stuff. So, it's a mix. We try to do our podcast once a week, every Tuesday, just, get a wide variety. We talk sports. We try to stay away from the politics side. We like to be lighthearted, not get, because, that can get kind of a little too real world-ish. We try to have a little bit of, more fun on the fun side. So
yep.
Yeah, man, that's really how it all kind of started from Game of Thrones. And then it kind of just bred to talking about really anything and everything. And I know people always say, well, you got to have like a vision and a straight line. Well, it's just, to me, we look at it as if it gets bigger, awesome, but it's just a fun hobby, right? Like it's fun talking to different people, different walks of life, getting different viewpoints and just having a good time with it.
People can see if you enjoy it. I mean, that's a big thing. So what I want to do is kind of a lightning round here with that. So here we go. Speaking of Game of Thrones, quick thoughts, Game of Thrones ending, how it ended.
Well, if you really want the full, I think we went 3.5 hours on this podcast. It was unreal. You can go back and listen to our episode on that one. But in the moment, and we actually did reaction. That's what it was. I mentioned, I forgot. We actually did reaction videos for the last season of Game of Thrones. That's where it got us to then go, hey, why don't we do these for Panthers games? And because we had one, I think it was episode 3 of the final season, and I'd never had anything go viral, and it was at like 40,000 by the time I took a shower and was going to bed, and it was at like 200,000. Like it was crazy numbers, and I never, and so in the moment, I knew it was going to be scrutinized, and I remember telling friends, I just want to enjoy it as it is. I know it's not going to be what the series started as. It's building up everything. They're going to rush it. I get that. So I just want to enjoy it. And then afterwards, we'll just tear it apart and realize how bad it was. So initially, I just soaked it all in. You can see our reaction videos. You can listen to our podcasts on it. Those are YouTube and in all our podcast episodes. But obviously, once you sit down and look at the meat and potatoes of the ending, I mean, it's just – for all that Game of Thrones built up and brought so much to the table, just to have it end with, Tyrion doing this big speech and giving it to Bran when, like, really? And then Jon had to go. Why did he have to leave? Why did he have to go back to the Knights? Like, it I haven't been able to go back and rewatch it just because of how upset I was with it. I want to, but it was tough.
Well, and I actually didn't watch the final season until, maybe a few months ago. Because I ended up, getting at our local library and I'm actually going to come off on the other side. I actually kind of like the way it ended, but for me, I'm not someone who kind of goes into something, thinking it's going to go one way or the other. Cause I mean, there's, even the Star Wars stuff, like some people kind of get upset about this and that. And I enjoy it for the fact that it is, as a kid, I grew up with Star Wars, we're being inundated with Star Wars stuff. I'm just enjoying it for the fact that it is, and you're right. I mean, there were some interesting choices in the Game of Thrones last season. It just kind of, it was interesting. There definitely could have been some changes but I'm glad that at least, we had an ending, you know what I mean? So,
yeah. Well, I think what hurt the most was after the fact, the two DB and Weiss and all them said, oh no, we got to go. And they took the Star Wars thing. Right. And they got a bag, they got a boatload of money. Cool. Great for them. But then when HBO came out and said, oh, we gave them an unlimited budget. They could have gone for however long they wanted and done what they wanted. That's what hurt the most, because the writers made it seem like they had to wrap this up fast. And HBO was like, no. And when there's very few shows that get an unlimited budget where they were like, no, you can spend whatever you want. And then they said they could. So that was knowing where it came from and how it took seasons to build so many of these reveals up.
Yep.
For then the final 7 episodes for it to happen so fast, I think is what really, when you look back on it and you just go, wow, like they could have easily made that final one, instead of 7 episodes, 12 to 20, and made it out of 2 seasons and really just wrapped everything up in a prettier bow. I still think, yes, they did wrap it up in a decent little bow there, but it was a disservice to those people who, like myself, who had kind of started from the beginning and watched it every year and just was like, oh, nope, let's just finish it up now instead of just, let's long play it. So I think that's what really got me more upset, is knowing that they had the time and the money to do it, and they didn't, and they rather rushed through it. And then they never even did the Star Wars stuff. That's even more frustrating, because they didn't even get to complete that task. So it was like they rushed away and didn't even get to do what they were supposed to do. So that, to me, I think was more upsetting than the actual ending in itself.
Absolutely. Well, talking about something that's not upsetting, so lightning round here, favorite beers and breweries off the top of your head.
Favorite beers, I mean, it's funny. Here in Charlotte, it seems like it's kind of the mecca almost. And there's Asheville down here too. But they've got a hop drop and roll down here from Noda. That's fantastic. I mean, I just found some Hop Slam down here as well from Bell's. That's always a good one. A little pricey, but still always a great beer. My favorite beer right now, and it's been it for a couple of years, is a brewery called Ass Clown Brewery down here, and it's in Cornelius, North Carolina. And they have a beer called Orange Citrus IPA, and it's like 6.7%, and it's just enough to where you can only drink two and you'll be passed out, but just enough where like you can drink a couple of them and it doesn't just completely knock you on your hind end there. So, and it's just a smooth drinker. It's got that orange little feel to it, but not too fruity. It does it right. So those, that would be my, beer there. And then there's a ton of breweries down here. Sierra Nevada here in Asheville is just, they put $300 million in the side of a mountain and just made this huge, cool little establishment. And then there's just a ton of other breweries down there in the area, One World, that are just kind of cool and niche and stuff too. So it really, if you ever get down this way, it's unreal the amount of breweries that are in the Charlotte area.
Well, I have been down that way, but actually when I was a youth group leader, so I wasn't able to partake in a lot of that stuff. So
Fair enough.
Well, you talked about, if the Beards Watch podcast did end, I would, venture to say that, it might end by you shaving your beard.
So, I mean, I've had the beard. I want to say when I was in high school, I started with the soul patch because my favorite Olympian of all time, Apollo Antonono, had one. Yeah. He was winning gold medals. And so I started with that. And then kind of just when I went to college, I just, you finally get a little free reign. So I would just grow it out and let it go here and there and do different kind of styles. And it's just kind of always stuck with me. And then getting out of college, it was, okay, you want to be in the media business, you need to, keep it clean shaven and all that stuff. And never really got to be on camera, and it was more behind the scenes stuff that I worked. So it was like, well, I can kind of just grow out my hair if I want, grow out my beard. And it just kind of went with the Beards Watch. It was at the beginning me, who I had a beard, and the other guy that had helped started with me, he had a beard as well. So that's where it kind of molded from the Night's Watch, the Beards Watch. And I don't think I've since like absolutely baby. And I also, just baby faced it. I think it's been since probably 2011. So yeah, about 11, 12 years. Yeah.
Well, I shave mine, and I know my kids don't like it when I shave my goatee off. So, well, this has been fantastic. I definitely appreciate your time. And where can everyone find you again?
You can find me at JRoll Nation. That's my personal Twitter account, and that's on Twitter and Instagram. And then the Beards Watch podcast is on Facebook, and then just at the Beards Watch is on Instagram and on Twitter. So that's where, and then obviously They See Me Roland, Roland, is the YouTube channel where we have all our fun, good times that we talked about earlier. So that's where you can find us, and that's where we'll be.
Definitely going to check it out. I appreciate it. Once again, this has been NFL Outdated, covered 2 series on the Carolina Panthers and some guy stuff with Jacob Roland. Thanks again.
Thanks, man.